Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Teens for Business. This is part two of our special episode with Dr. Michelle Ryder, who is the CEO of the American Psychological Foundation. So now we're going to be giving some of our thoughts on what Dr. Ryder shared with us. If you haven't listened to part one, be sure to check that one out because she gives us a lot about what she thinks of psychology. So one thing we learned is what industrial and organization psychology is. It's commonly referred to as IO psychology. That's what she called it at the very beginning. And it kind of just talks about the applied organizational psychology that is used to understand how people behave in corporate workplaces. So for example, like mental health and like productivity, or how even HR functions. And I think that's really important because it's not just thinking of people as like a machine that like just runs when you tell it to run. Like everyone has what they think, and like there's burnout, there's just different types of motivation. And I think like this entire part about IO psychology is really interesting as it relates to business and like the corporate workplace. And I think it kind of opens up this new like thinking, because usually when you think business, you think a lot more about like, okay, how do I maximize productivity? How do I whatever? But a lot that goes amiss is understanding like, okay, how do I make this one person feel better? Or like, how do I make this collective group of people act in a certain way? How do I predict what they're going to do? And that is really just what is related to psychology. And that's kind of what Dr. Ryder shared with us. And as she is the CEO of APF, so APF, obviously, American Psychological Foundation, is like the foundation for psychology, but also she herself has the PhD in psychology. So she was able to share a lot of her experience, a lot of her insight with us. So if you haven't checked that one out, just make sure to check that episode out with our interviews with her. And just to talk a little bit about what we thought were really interesting, just tidbits we thought was kind of stuck out to us. So I learned a lot during that interview. So before that, I just thought business psychology and just understanding like what people would do or things like that. If you're having like a negotiation deal or like anything like that. But I learned kind of, like I said, the whole thing about industrial and organization psych and how it's really called IO and things like that. One thing I thought was really interesting that she mentioned was that her company has these things called mental health days. And it's basically just a company-wide thing, and you just take a day off and you do whatever you want to do on that day. But it's kind of recognized that you don't really have to work. It's like a holiday, but it's a company-wide thing that goes on. And I think one thing she mentioned that really stuck out to me was that it's kind of very different from just taking a vacation day, because on a vacation day, it's you yourself taking that day. People are still going to email you. They're still going to have things that are like, okay, Jackie, please like finish this thing and send it back to me. Or they're going to still have tasks that kind of pile on. But if you take a day and for everyone to say, okay, we're just going to collectively recognize that this day is for us to rest, that is so much more different than having a vacation day for yourself only. And it's a lot more impactful because you don't come back to having a whole to-do list left. So that was like one thing that really stuck out to me. What about you guys?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I did not know much about psychology and business, and I definitely did not know about industrial organization psychology. And yeah, I definitely noticed that like not many companies do have these mental health days, and like especially curious on like why they haven't picked this up, because that's what a general trend is. So yeah, very curious on how things progress, especially on the business side, is with this new awareness in psychology.
Yeah, definitely echo all those points out. I also learned a little bit about the psychology and the application of mental health days during schools. I know that some schools, and actually my home state of Illinois actually does offer every school 5 days of mental health, but I don't think that is the case for other states. I'm pretty sure Illinois is the only state that has those laws. So it's like really interesting to get like another perspective about mental health days and just in general psychology and its applications in schools.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. And like mental health days, also like in workplaces, I think she talked for a while just about like how beneficial it truly is for like not only like giving your workers this day off, but like letting them know that basically this company that they're working at supports them. And it's helpful that, like just because everybody's taking this day off at the same time, so you don't feel stressed out and like that you have to catch up on this work. I think that's just important to like have a day to yourself where you can kind of do whatever you need to get your mind in the right place. So the work that you're doing is gonna be even better when you come back from this mental health day. I just thought that was pretty important.
Yeah, the work, speaking of work being better, I think she also mentioned how like psychology is important in business, not just for like figuring out how people can be the most productive, but it also kind of figures out on like how the company can best support the employee. Like even though yes, the employee technically in the system is supposed to be there and make money for the company, it's also about like figuring out how the company within the realms of what it can do can best support that employee. And she said something about like how psychology can help people just feel better, do things better, and have the company be better, really. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think a big focus of our interview with her was on like mental health days. And obviously, since she is like the CEO of her company, we focused a lot about the workplace and her experiences in this corporate sort of situation. But we were also thinking about how the implications of that would be in schools or like a teenage environment, something that's not like I'm doing this for money. I have to go to school because like I have to go to school. What do you guys think about having mental health days in the workplace? Jack, I know you touched upon this and when you were talking about what you thought was really interesting about the interview, but how do you guys feel about the implementation of these mental health days or mental health initiatives in schools?
Well, my school, from my experience, is that we just got a counselor this year. Um, but I don't think a lot of people are using it simply because like our culture around studying, definitely in where I live. But it definitely shows that more and more schools are noticing these psychological trends, and they're noticing like how sometimes educational culture could get a little toxic and not helpful for the students that participate in it. So it's definitely nice to see that more and more schools are noticing these trends and trying to help their students.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's like it's I know my school personally, like we have counselors, but majority of students like they don't usually use these counselors for help in terms of like like going to them when they need like resources and stuff. So if they have like they can make it like so that students are more aware of like the fact that help is available when they need it. I think more students would be able to get the help that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. In my school, as I mentioned before, Illinois is one of the only states that have probably the only state that has like put into law mental health days. So schools in Illinois have 5 mental health days that they can use across a school year, I believe. But and in general, like psychology in my school, we have 8 counselors, so we're pretty well covered in that. And I'm pretty sure we have a few school psychologists as well. But I haven't really heard of anyone really like use. I mean, we obviously use our counselors, but I haven't really heard of us using like our psychologists that much. And most of the times when my friends or I like use mental health days, they're like more like they're not really through mental health. I acknowledge that some people in my school definitely use those mental health days to like recuperate on their mental health. But most of my friends who use mental health days use them to like study for the SAT or like study for like a test that they don't think their concepts are fully like mastered.
Oh yeah, I'm actually curious. Like, how do the mental health days work at your school, Jack?
Okay, so in my school, I think you just call into like the attendance office and then you say, "Oh, I'm taking a mental health day," and then I think the school will. I'm not sure because I've never taken one. My parents won't let me take one, but I think in the afternoon, I think the psychologist will call you, like, will call your home and ask if like you're doing okay. I think that's how it works, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, at my school we have mental health days too. And they're like what Jack said, you just tell your attendance office like, hey, I don't really feel too good today, or I just want to take a mental health day and take a break and relax a little bit. And then they just excuse you for attendance, and that's really kind of all it is. Jack mentioned how like the school psychologist might call you and be like, hey, like, are you doing okay? And check up on you. But I don't think for my school we have that. It's just you tell the attendance office, they're like, okay, you're not here for a reason, you're excused, come back tomorrow, or something like that. And it's just yeah. What do you guys think about that? I'm especially curious because I know for a lot of students, like I was talking to some of my friends about that, and obviously, like the idea of a mental health day is like pretty important and like pretty useful too. Like if you're feeling really like under pressure and you think like I just don't want to go to school today, like the thought of that is pretty useful and like nice of schools to do. But I know like my friends were talking about this and some people kind of abuse it, and like if they just don't want to come to school, they're like, no, I'm not skipping school, I'm using a mental health day. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think that Jack can probably tell more from his personal experience, but from my point of view, is that not all things are really perfect, right? So some people will definitely abuse the system. That's why there's like limits, right? That's why I think the limits are for. Um, but definitely, I do feel like I had times where I probably needed a day off, but I couldn't and still went to school, you know? So I think it will be very helpful, especially for those who are stressed under their educational workloads, to have take a day off for their mental health and then not be scared that they'll be missing schoolwork or they'll be having more workload when they come back.
Yeah, I definitely echo those points. Yeah, I think it's just like really important because sometimes like the stress is like piling up and sometimes you can't manage it. So maybe you just need a day off, maybe do some maybe do some of your accomplish some of your work on that day and like catch up a little bit or like brush up on something you haven't really mastered. But like but as like you said before, like there's a lot of people that kind of like somewhat like abuse it. They just take it off. They just take a day off because they want to take a day off. I think what my parents want to do with mental health days is that they want to turn them into college visit days, but I'm not. I don't really know if that's considered like abusing like the system.
Oh, do you guys have like college visit days? I know like for us, if you're your junior or senior year, you get like 5 days a year where you can just tell the attendance office like, oh, I'm going to Pennsylvania to visit Wharton, or like I'm going to Boston to visit some school. Like you just tell them and they're like, okay. And then you have 5 days where you can just go. Is that what you guys do?
Definitely
Uh,
not.
Not for us.
our school does two for college visit days, but no more than that.
California schools are different.
No, like people are using their break to go do college tours. So
Yeah.
like I know
Yeah.
like a couple of my friends are actually going to East Coast during break because for colleges.
Yeah, I'm traveling for college visits in spring break, but I feel like sometimes if I like want to extend that trip to like different schools that I might not be able to reach within like the week limit, maybe I could use the mental health days to like accomplish that because my parents won't let me take a mental health day if I'm ever stressed.
Then what's the point of it?
Yeah.
I mean, I get from like what Jack has said, I can see why people or schools are incorporating mental health days, but I don't think they're having the intended effects on the student population. Because like people are using it for other purposes and parents are strategizing around these extra days off. I don't think it's
Yeah.
intended for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also like, even if you implement it or like you have really strict guidelines, there's always like some way for someone to like take a well-intentioned idea and turn it into like abusing it of some sort, but like you can't really account for that. And I think like kind of just the thought of the school giving you a mental health day is like not nice because like but like it's nice to think of that they at least like somewhat do think about what students will want. And just having like that mental health day, are there any initiatives your schools? I'm curious about this because apparently California schools just don't don't really do anything. But you guys are a private school, so maybe
Yeah,
that's
I think that's
different.
because we're private schools.
Do you guys have
I-
any like, things?
No, I think this is a big area we need to like get better at, because this public school really close to me called Homestead High School. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but there's this senior, and apparently
Yeah,
he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Whoa.
like
Like,
he rode a bike there, I'm pretty sure.
yeah. And it's like this big news story because I heard, like, apparently the rumors are that he was stressed from either college apps or like his parents were putting a lot of pressure on him. It's like his senior year of high school, so I think there needs to be like some sort of like resources out there to like let students know like there's like you can get help when you need it. You don't
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
like schools with a reputation of stressful students. Like I'm Kaiwan, you know, like Gun High, right?
Yeah.
Like they're notorious for having students like walk in front of the railway and get like kill themselves. Like it's definitely a very big problem, especially in the Bay Area. And I think schools should definitely take measures to counteract these problems and make sure the student body is learning and also learning healthily. You don't want people to be stressed and from their parents and from the school at the same time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've already discussed a lot of the developments of mental health that are going on in my school and also in my state. But generally, despite a lot of people abusing it, I definitely see that a lot of people need like just to like take a break, take a layoff from everything that has been like stressing them out. So generally, I do think it's very beneficial and should be implemented into schools.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, like any policy, there's probably a way to like go around it. So I think you have to like or school administrators understand that there's always going to be some people who are gonna abuse it, but at the same time, there's also probably a lot more people, a lot more students who would benefit from those policies, which is why probably like my school, your school, I mean, Ivan and Kyman's not, but like schools, some of them have like chosen to implement them. And so I think that's a pretty interesting thing. Are there any other takeaways you guys had from Dr. Ryder's interview?
Mm, I mean, definitely we should probably explore the methods we take to combat like uh stress, burnout, those big things that happen to students and employees. Um, and it's nice to see that schools and more companies are taking that into consideration. But definitely, times are changing. So I don't like, as she mentioned before, like you can't rely on the same old method to have the same results every time. So uh, we'll see like what new methods like schools companies come up with to combat these changes.
Yeah, I think so too. Come back in 10 years, listen to this podcast and think about like what changed. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And like you can't really take what happened a couple decades ago and be like, oh no, but we did that, so they can do it now. Like that doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think she shared a lot of like interesting little tidbits with us. But yeah, so thank you guys all for tuning into this episode of Teens for Business. Like we said, if you haven't already listened to part 1, make sure to go check that out with Dr. Ryder. It was really interesting, and I really think that we learned a lot. But yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on our next episode.